that I think things can run together if not looked at in a very organized fashion. And one thing that's unique to the teachings of Kabbalah as explored through the Chabad lens, you might know this, you might not know this. Chabad actually stands for Chachma, Bina, and Dat. You know, the three intellectual powers. We focused on in our studies a lot about Chachma, which is creativity, and Bina, which is analysis, analytical thought. There's also a third dimension of the intelligence, which is Dat. Together, it's Chabad. But here's why I'm saying this. Because Kabbalah is not meant, from a Chabad perspective, Kabbalah is not meant to be something, very lofty and like theoretical and something that's not understood, but kind of like sounds, esoteric. Kabbalah is meant to be understood, and we're meant, the ultimate goal from the Chabad perspective is to understand Kabbalah like you would understand Talmud study. In other words, rigorous intellectual pursuit and analysis and understanding, really, really understanding it. So, last week we were talking about the process of original darkness and how before creation, all there is the infinite, God, and the infinite light. And then you have this moment of contraction, tzimtzum, which creates darkness, and then there's light afterwards, and then there's more darkness. There's this interplay, but we talked about a lot of different dimensions, and I was thinking it would be nice to have that mapped out. So that's what I want to, at least the way I want to start off today's class is mapping out the spiritual realms. And I prepared actually a document, I think it's 4 pages, with some maps, if you will. Not a treasure map, so there's no like little X that says, if you go there. But a map to understand kind of what the universe, what the spiritual universe looks like from the perspective of Kabbalah. But I want to share one more thing before we jump in, and that is that it's important to remember that unlike a physical map, does anybody still use physical maps anymore? Or are we all online? I remember going to AAA. Remember that? At least here, you go to AAA, it's like, I'm going to, I'm road tripping to Texas. So I need a map. Get me there. And you would like map it out. And you have no idea in real time, like what the deal is, right? Like, is there road shut down? I don't know. The map was printed 5 years ago. How are you going to know if a road is shut down last week? How do you know construction? So thank God we've figured out technology how to get real-time information. But one thing about a physical map is that the locations marked in the map exist in physical space. And they're differentiated by space. So one location is west and the other is east, at least relative to each other, right? One is north, one is south. There's a physical or spatial distinction. There's differences when it comes to physical space. It's very important to note as we begin this exploration that the spiritual realms do not exist in physical space. Well, it doesn't mean they don't exist also within our realm to some extent. But what I mean to say is that they're not going to be differentiated by actual space the way we know it. When we talk about a realm, or let's say a world, Kabbalah, as we'll see in a moment, we speak of 4 general worlds. So one world is higher than the next. It doesn't mean on the map that it's north of the other. So if you travel up, right, if you drive up, you're going to hit the next world. Or if you take a spacecraft and you break through the atmosphere, you're going to end up from Asiya to the world of Yetzirah. That's not what it means. It's kind of like, I'll give you an example. It's kind of like emotions. Right? You're feeling love, and you're also feeling maybe sadness. Which, by the way, we can have 2 emotions at the same time. That's part of the human condition, is that we can have 2 even conflicting emotions at the same time. Right? We all have conflicting emotions from time to time, yeah. So you might have joy and happiness on one side, and the little sadness about something else, or even maybe the same thing on the other side. But if I ask you a question, can you locate your joy? Tell me exactly where it is, spatially. And where's your sadness? Can you locate it? Can you map it? Can you graph it on a? Because it doesn't exist in physical space. These are emotions, feelings that we have that either are isolated somewhere. These are feelings that we have that aren't necessarily located in a certain, part of the body or in a certain area of space. They're feelings or a concept. I'll give you an example. The concept that 1 + 1 is 2. Where does that exist? Does it exist in a location? There's no location. It's a concept. It exists in truth. It just is. Right? Another concept, that the color green is green. Or a concept that, I don't know, any other concept. Philosophical, mathematical, scientific. Right? Whatever the concept is, concepts don't exist, are not distinguished by space. They're distinguished by the concept itself. What makes 1 + 1 = 2 different than another concept? It's because there's different concepts. It's not because one exists north and one exists south. That's not the way we differentiate between different concepts. So I'm only saying this because as we explore the various spiritual realms, I want to make sure that I want to be very clear that it's not that one exists higher physically or lower physically or north or south or east or west. The differentiation, what differs between them, or what distinguishes one from the other, is not the space, but it's the concept. It's the energy, if you will, of that level. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to share my screen with you. And let's explore this together. Okay, can you all see my screen? Someone please unmute yourselves and let me know if you can see my screen. Yes? Okay, great, awesome.
Yes.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so that we can really do a nice deep dive. Actually, let me go back to like a single page and give you the overall, and then we're going to zoom in. Okay, so what you're looking at now is a depiction. This is not a literal depiction. You can hold the 10 sefirot under a microscope and see this configuration. Any more than you can hold an emotion up to a microscope and see, some sort of configuration like this. But nonetheless, this is a configuration or depiction of the 10 sefirot, the 10 divine energy emanations, as understood and described in Kabbalah. The 10 sefirot not aligning top to bottom, but having a right, left, and a center. So let me now enlarge this image, and let's do a deep dive. So first of all, at the top, I wrote Partzuf, the 10 sefirot. Partzuf means Partzuf can mean the face. Why is it called the face? Because like a face, a face is not a single line, right? A face has balance. There's the right, the left, and the center. So you have with the eyes, you have a right eye, a left eye, and then you have a nose. You have a right ear, a left ear, and then you have the mouth. I'm not necessarily going in any specific order, but the point is there's balance, there's symmetry and balance to the human face. The 10 sefirot, as they are depicted or understood in a balanced fashion, are called the Partzuf, which means the face, which means that there's a right, a left, and a center. And I've shared this chart with you with this class many times, but just to go through them again, we have Chachma, Bina, and Dat. This is the basic translation. It doesn't explain what they are, but a basic translation: wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. These are the 3 intellectual powers. That's why they're color-coded in blue, because intellect is typically colder than emotion. Intellect could be more detached than emotion. Intellect could be more sterile than emotion. So therefore, like your tap, like your water spigot, blue is cold and red is hot. Okay, so intellect is depicted here as blue, and emotions, which we'll get to in a second, are depicted as red. The emotions, of course, chesed, gevura, teferet, netzach, hod, yesod, and at the bottom we have malchut. So chesed is loving kindness, gevura is severity, teferet is compassion. Like always, right, left, center, right, left, center. Netzach is ambition, hod is devotion, yesod is bonding, and malchut is leadership. So this is your basic structure of the 10 sefirot. Now, I have to be very clear here. Remember what I said before about spatial considerations? Okay. These do not exist in space like it looks here. It's not like Chachma hangs around in the top right corner and Bina hangs around in the top left corner physically. The reason why they're depicted as right, left, center in this way is because the concept of Chachma aligns with the concept of the way Kabbalah explains the right side. And Bina, or Gevura, or Hod for that matter, they're depicted on the left side because their energies align with the energy of the left side, so to speak, as explored in Kabbalah. And the center energies are depicted in the center because their energies align with the energy of the center. So the right typically is open. The left side is typically a little bit more closed. And the middle is the energy of the middle is balance. And so you'll find components of open, closed, and balanced in all of the energies that are either on the right, the left, or the center. So Chachma, for example, creativity, top right. How does one, and we've discussed this at length in the last few months here at Kabbalah Coffee, what is Chachma and how do we attain more creativity in our lives? It's by holding on to what we know less. It's by being open to new possibilities. As long as we're stuck with what we already know, we will not touch or tap into creativity. Chachma, creative wisdom, happens when we let go of what we already know. We let go of what we think. We let go of what's possible even, and we imagine what could be. So instead of clenching, instead of gripping tightly, it's letting go. It's dreaming. It's imagining. It's loosening the muscles as opposed to clenching. Bina, which is on the left side, which is understanding, which we explained is analytical understanding. So breaking it down, analyzing it, really getting into the nitty-gritty of a concept. All right, that's a tightening. That's the mind is now wrapping itself around the concept to really understand it and to really break it down and to understand all the details. So now that's a grip. It's more of a closed posture, right? So Chachma is open, Bina is closed. The same thing is true with Chesed and Gevura. Chesed is giving. It's love and generosity and kindness, right? It's a free flow of energy from inside myself to someone else. It's an open flow. Gevura is putting the brakes on the flow. It's saying, 1 second, should I really give? Should I really love? Should I really be kind? Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe it's not appropriate right now. Maybe I should put the brakes on my giving, on my love, on my kindness, whatever that would be. So again, Chesed is open. Gevura is not fully closed, but it's in the more of a posture of closed. It's interesting because the right side, it's always, I'm going to use this word, it's always more loose. When I say loose, it's more about letting go and kind of relaxing almost. Not relaxing to the point of not doing, but kind of, you know how in science we know that smiling actually requires less muscles than frowning, right? You know this? Studies have shown this. So, the cute line is, save your energy, smile, right? Like, Don't expend the extra energy putting your face in a frown. Smile because it's less energy. The right side is always the less. I have to be careful with the words that I use. It's not that it's less of a tense energy. The left side is more tense or intense. By the way, Gevura, which is on the left side, the first emotion on the left side. Gevura, top left red circle, severity, discipline, judgmentalism. Gevura itself, could somebody unmute yourself? What's the literal translation of Gevura? Literal meaning of Gevura. What does Gevura literally mean in Hebrew?
I thought it was strength, but I don't know if that's right.
Yes. It means strength. You know why it's strength? Because it's harder to clench. It's harder to hold than to relax and let go. When I say harder, I don't mean personality-wise harder. I mean on an energy level, the more natural state of energy is free-flowing. Gevura, which is kind of like holding back, that requires actually strength or extra muscles, like I said about the frown versus the smile. It actually requires more muscles and more strength to withhold than to give. The natural state, if you ever want to look at natural states of things, I'm going to stop sharing just so I can see you all. The natural state of human beings, always helpful to look at a child. I would say that most children, the natural state is, running around and a freedom, and right? Yes, you with me on this? Ellie, come. We have a live child here. Let's see. Let's do a demo. Ellie, first of all, say hi to everybody.
Hi.
There you go. Ellie, how old are you? All right. We love Ellie. Ellie, would you rather run around and have fun, or, I don't know what the other or is. Do you like running around and having fun? Yes. Okay. All right. You're good. Get back. Hold on. First of all, wait, come here. Hold up the book that you're using. Look at that guy. You see that? Children's prayer book. He's davening. Excellent. Keep on going, buddy. All right. Here's the deal. Oh, and he's done. There you go. Back on the show. Classic. All right, excellent. You just finished? Wow, that's perfect timing. Okay, so getting back. The natural state is kind of like, the natural human state is openness and curiosity and all of these wonderful, just like free-flowing energy states. And no fault of our own, as we go through life and stuff happens, we start, clenching a little bit more and protecting a little bit more and holding ourselves in a little bit more and being more guarded. Yes? Is that true? I think it's true. Yeah, Susan.
Well, I think you have to kind of, not necessarily more guarded, but decide where to kind of put that energy, because it could go any which way. And then that, to me, is what Gevura does, is help you kind of decide what channel to tune into or where to put that flow.
Yes, 100%. Gevura is extremely necessary because, for example, if we were open to all the things around us, it would be overwhelming and distracting, and it wouldn't be very efficient. So that's why Gevura is not a distortion of a healthy personality. It's actually part and parcel of a very healthy personality. But that being said, it requires what I would call a superimposition. Right? It's another layer on top of our natural openness and curiosity. We have to then say, well, let me be a little bit more discerning, or let me focus a little bit more, let me rein it in a little bit on whatever level that is. But it's important to understand that right, left, center is not spatial. It's not like chesed is on the right. Right? Literally, when I say right, in space. Conceptually, it's right. Why conceptually? Because Kabbalah has something to say about what right is, what left is, and what center is. Right? Right is openness. Left is a little bit, tightening it a little bit, and the center is always that more of a balance. I think I just saw Joy wrote something about processing the data. Exactly. So Bina, essentially, for the mind, is doing the same for the mind as Gevura does for the heart, right? Gevura is about tightening things up a little bit, and Bina. Let me share my screen once again so that we can all look at the same chart here. Bina on the top left side is the same concept, where it's taking the idea and tightening it down, right? Chachma, as we've explained at length, Chachma is like infinite potential almost. It's fantastic. Chachma is like the dream. Chachma is that creative, the creative exhilaration. Bina is, all right, let's figure it out. Let's define it. Okay, now it's being defined. Definition, by definition, means restriction. It means limitation. So right side is more of a posture of open, left is a little bit more closed, not fully open. Well, it's not fully either way, but it's more open, a little bit more closed, and then the center is more of the balance. Okay, but the point here is to have a solid understanding of the 10 Sefirot and understand that throughout the journey that we're about to take, or that we're taking through the cosmic realms, you're going to see these 10 Sefirot again and again and again. In fact, even in realms that are so lofty that we think there aren't 10 Sefirot, Kabbalah says, yeah, even there too. On a subtle level, even in that very lofty dimension, even prior to the first world of Atzilut, where we think maybe that's where the 10 Sefirot begin. No, there's either the 10 Sefirot there also, or the potential of them, which basically means that on some level there is a like an impression of them that unfolds from that space. The point is that this is a very important piece of understanding the Kabbalistic map of the universe, is understanding these 10 Sefirot. So we have 10 energies. They don't look like this under a microscope. These are conceptual things. I mean, they're realities, but they don't exist in space, right, left, center. They exist in concept, right, left, and center. And this is one way to depict it. Make sense so far? Yes? I know I'm emphasizing about the non-spatial thing. I just don't want to create an impression in your mind that it's actually, existing somewhere in the right of the universe or the left of the universe.
Another question, Rabbi?
Yeah, go ahead.
So remember when we were making gemstones and Kabbalah necklace, and my necklace has the two sides, and you recommended starting with the right side because the right side had special meaning.
Yeah.
So was that why, visually we have the Chachma on the right side?
Yeah, so basically it works like this. Right, left, center aren't literally spatial as understood by Kabbalah, but they are called right, left, center. So what we do in our own lives is before I say this last point, if we have a choice between right side or left side in Kabbalah, we favor the right side because the right side is always the more open and giving side. So if we're favoring an energy, if we could be more generous or more cautious, Kabbalah would say, again, I can't, every situation has to be judged, and I'm not advocating a reckless, way of living, but in general, if we have a choice between more open and giving or a little bit more constricted, we should lean toward the right as opposed to the left in personality. That's good advice. So somebody asks us for something, and we could go either way. We should train ourselves to always lean toward the right, even if that's not our immediate personality. And one way to look at it is that when we pray to God, when we ask Hashem, when we ask God for what we need, we certainly want God to be operating from a right side and not from the left side. When we're asking God for a new year, for a year filled with life and health and prosperity and happiness and all of and peace of mind and peace of heart and all of the wonderful blessings that we ask for. And Rosh Hashanah is coming up around the corner. It's just a few weeks. So when we ask for that, I'll give you two options. I mean, it's not even a choice. I mean, it's going to be obvious. But would you rather God operate open and generous fashion with the blessings, or analyze under a microscope, well, last year I gave you X, Y, and Z. What'd you do with it last year? Did you really use all of the time that I gave you, for meaningful things? Or did you use it for, do we really want God to operate that way? We don't. So Kabbalah teaches, if we don't want God to operate that way, it's only right that we don't operate that way either, because the energy that we put out in the world is typically the energy that we're getting back. So it's kamai, like, did we say it last week? Maybe. It's kamai, maybe in a different class. Kamaim apanam apanam, like water reflects the face. Oh, we did it Thursday night in our Tanya class. As water reflects the face, so too heart of one reflects the heart of the other. So the heart of the universe reflects the heart of the individual human being. And so if we're in a more tense fashion, that could create the same responsive energy from above, and we don't want that, right? No one wants. I don't know anybody who's in their prayers to God is saying, you know what, I want you to audit me this year. Who's asking for an audit? Zero percentage of people are asking to be audited by God. There is no way. As we say in the prayers in Asana Tokov, one of the most emotional prayers of the high holidays on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that's the one that says, on this day it's written, on Rosh Hashanah it's written, on Yom Kippur it's sealed, how many shall be born, how many shall die, who shall live, who shall die. It's a very emotional prayer. And in that prayer, we point out that in truth, no one can truly be found meritorious in God's eyes. In other words, if God is really, really looking, with a magnifying glass, with our imperfections, we're going to stand up and say, yeah, audit me, no problem. I have nothing to hide. Which human being says I have nothing to hide? You kidding me? You know what I mean? Like, everyone's got, there's no perfection. So what do we ask? We ask for a right side modality, and that's why in our lives we favor the right side. So Donna, this is a very long answer to your question. So in Jewish law, and it's actually, this Kabbalistic idea is reflected in Jewish law of daily activities, we are told to favor the right over the left. So when you're getting dressed, and I mentioned this in the jewelry making class, when getting dressed, we always put on the right side before the left side. When doing any activity, we if possible, we prefer the right over the left. In fact, in Judaism it says, if you come to a fork in the road, unlike Yogi Berra, who said when you come to a fork in the road, take it, right? Which makes no sense. Judaism says if you're not sure which way to go, you can probably guess which way that Judaism says. Take a right. That's the way it is. So that's a little bit about that. But again, although it's reflected in our behavior in physical right, but I don't want to create a misimpression that these spiritual energies are actually existing spatially in the right or the left or the center. They're conceptually right, left, and center. So for example, the example that I gave before, if you were having an emotion of love and an emotion of sadness in your heart at the same time, it's not like one is existing in the right side of your heart and one is in the left side of your heart, spatially. The emotions exist as they exist within you, but we would say one is right and one is left. I hope that's making sense. I see something came through the chat. Let me just double check. Good. So questions that. So David asks, what about tying our shoes? So let's talk about getting dressed for a second. So getting dressed. I'm just going to talk about, hey you. Which shoe do we put on first? Right or left? Right. Okay, so we always dress right first. So right, wearing a shirt. Right sleeve, left sleeve, pants, right leg, socks, right foot, left foot, shoes. Right foot, left foot. But then tying the shoes, we then go to the left. Why? Just to confuse things. No, I'm kidding. Why do we go left first for tying? Because it evokes the mitzvah of tefillin. Tefillin. right? The phylacteries, the black boxes. So that, the Torah says, is meant to be tied on the weaker arm, or the weaker hand. Now, all the lefties can unite and revolt, I get it. But most people, again, my sister's a lefty, so I love lefties. But from my understanding, most people are righties. And so for most people, the weaker arm or weaker hand is the left. So most people are putting tefillin on the left arm. And then there, of course, there's a head tefillin, but the arm tefillin, you only do one. Funny story. There was a fellow once who saw somebody, this is New York back in, using it as a mirror, aren't you? There's a Jewish fellow who was, I don't know, walking through the streets of Manhattan one day, back in the day, and he saw some dude on the street, like, selling some things, including a pair of tefillin. And he realized, like, it must have been, like, a stolen pair of tefillin. Like, it wasn't like, you know, so he looks at the tefillin, and he's like, oh, you only have one arm. You're missing part of the set. So he bought it, like, very cheap, and then on the bag, it had a name, so he tracked down the owner, whatever. But he negotiated the price by saying, oh, it only has one arm. But the tefillin, the mitzvah tefillin is you only put it on one arm, and then there's a box for the head as well. But the arm is always on the weaker arm. So since most people do it on the left, so that the notion of tying a knot, although tefillin is not a knot, but it's still tying, so the notion of tying is associated with the left, which is why when it comes to tying our shoes, to kind of evoke the tefillin, although it's not the same, but we start with the left and then the right. Does that make sense? Yes? So we always favor the right because, again, on an energy level, it's kind of like a way to embody a spiritual idea, but not that the spiritual idea is actually on the right or the left, but it's a physical action to kind of like live in that lifestyle. But the left side is for tying because it evokes a tefillin. Okay, but now let's get back. Oh, for left-handed people, can we get a pair of tefillin? Yes, absolutely. Yes, yeah. So lefties would put on tefillin on the right arm. Yes, the tefillin are actually made differently. Well, the tefillin are made. You know what? Let's do this. Ellie, can you jump down for a second? I'm going to show you the difference. Can you bring me that box that's sticking out right there? Right there, the bag, sorry. Yeah, that guy. All right. Tefillin bag. Here we go. This is the shel yad. I don't know if you can see that. It's hard to see. Shel yad. This means it belongs to the arm, to the hand. This is the hand tefillin. Okay. So let me take it out of the box. This is the box over the box. This is the protective cover. What they do before plastic, who knows? But these are plastic. Look like little tanks, no? Yes. The left arm is closer to the heart, correct. The left arm is, it says the tefillin should be near the heart. But nonetheless, the first choice, the first decision is by righty or lefty, is by your dominant. The first thing is on the weaker arm, and then you lean it toward the heart. So for example, I don't know if I can get like a good shot here, but whatever, you put on the tefillin. So this is the lefty pair, and you would put on the arm. I need some leverage. Turn it like kind of towards, like the inside of the arm, kind of towards the heart. Black on black is just, you're not going to be able to see it. All right, hold on. There we go. Okay, so here's the box. Goes on over here on the inside kind of this muscle. And then, you tie it after that, but it's basically pointing toward the heart. Now, if you put it on the right arm, you would do the same thing, but also lean it. It needs a little bit. The Wi-Fi still works. The connection is still there. It's a little bit, just a few inches over, but it's still pointing toward the same direction. It'll get to the heart. But here's what I want to point out: the tefillin go on kind of, here's the knot goes on the inside. And the knot, all of this is part of the Jewish law of the tefillin. Oh, hold on, let me enter. Okay, so if you look at the tefillin, I don't know how good the lighting is. It's like a black background and it's black on black. But if you can see it, there's a little bit more of a cutout over here on this side where the knot kind of rests against the side of the box. So it's cut out a little bit so that can happen. Anyway, it's a little hard to see on through the video, but nonetheless, this is what it is. A pair of tefillin for a righty would be cut like the knot. The straps would be reversed. So instead of the knot being on this side toward the inside, it would be on this side toward the inside. Are you with me on what I'm saying? Yes, instead of being on this side, it would be on this side because it's always facing in. And the cutout on the actual box, right, would be, the bigger cutout would be on this side, but the knot side, and the smaller one would be on that side. So the actual boxes are manufactured differently for the righty or for the lefty. Yeah. And the knots are reversed, basically. Anyway, I'm not sure why I elaborated so much on it, but nonetheless, that's the deal. But yeah, it would be a different tefillin. I mean, same essential tefillin, but just cut and knotted a little bit differently based on righty or lefty. So yeah, but there's absolutely a lefty pair of tefillin that would go on the right side, and a righty pair of tefillin goes on the left. I wonder if I've ever had that instance. I think one time I ordered tefillin for somebody. Somebody was ordering tefillin, and it turns out I assumed they were a righty and they were really a lefty. Whatever. I mean, it's just practice to ask, righty or lefty just to make sure. Okay, so getting back to the chart. Let's get back. Oh, hold on. I see something in the chat. No. Okay, so I already addressed that. All right, let's get back to the chart. So we have here the 10 sefirot. Now, let's go to the next page. The next page shows the 10 sefirot inside a world. Now, I have to be clear again. This is not the way it looks. This is the way I'm depicting it. It's not the way it looks. This is not like Google Maps where you can see the topography or you can see the skyscrapers in a city. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm just giving you a visual to imagine what this might, or to imagine a world. So this is an example of a spiritual world with the 10 sefirot. Now, of course, the difference here is that I put a circle around the 10 sefirot, which indicates that in the world, in every world of the 4 worlds, there exist the 10 sefirot. They are what drives, if you will, the energy force, or they are the energy force of that given world. Okay, next, on the next page, I have 4 worlds. These are the 4 worlds of Kabbalah. So we have the world of Atzilut. I guess I'll make it a little bit bigger so that it's more readable. We have at the top the world of Atzilut, which is the world of emanation. Then we have the world of Buriah, the world of creation. Then we have the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation. And then we have the world of Asiyah, the world of action at the bottom. We exist, you and I, this reality of our life, we exist in the final world of action, the world of Asiyah. But the world of Asiyah also has 2 dimensions. There's a spiritual side of the world and a physical dimension of Asiyah. Wherein the lower physical dimension of the world of Asiyah, I hope that made sense what I just said. So these are 4 spiritual worlds. We exist in the world of Asiyah, Hagashmi, the physical side or half, not like half, but like the physical mirror of the world of Asiyah. That's where we exist. That's where we are. But there are 4 worlds, and each world has the identical energies inside, but obviously on a much loftier level. So to explain this, what's usually helpful is to talk about moving from a creative idea to a finished product. So here's the example that I'll share with you. Imagine you have a vision. Imagine you want to build a home, right? And when I say home, I mean like a house. Like you want to build a house. So that process is going to go, and when I say build a house, I don't mean buy a house. I mean build a house. Like straight up build a house from scratch. So that process is going to be, it's going to be a process. From an initial vision to collaboration with architects and engineers, to drawing up the plans, to hiring a contractor, to starting maybe demolition first, starting building, before starting, getting the groundwork, getting the foundation started, getting that poured. I mean, to go from no building to a building to a house or any building or any, I'm just giving an example, right, of building something. It's a process. It's absolutely a process. Imagine you have an idea to put up, a 50-foot skyscraper in a downtown. Pick your favorite city. You want to build a skyscraper. Why? What's your vision? So you start off with a vision, like this is going to be a place where, it's going to be a live, work, play. It's going to be whatever. You're going to have a vision for it. And the vision is a general vision. Like, what's the point of this? This is what it's about. And then you're going to need a detailed vision. Okay, so what does it look like? Right? If this is the vision, if this is the energy of what it's about, so then what are the features? What are the practical features? And then you have to get it drawn up, and then you got to get, like I said before, architects and engineers. Does it actually work, or how best to do it? Then you make decisions, and then let alone getting down to the nitty gritty of like colors and textures and finishes and space and square footage. I mean, all of these things have to be decided and fleshed out and worked out, and then after all those details are set, then there's the whole actual building process. Then you actually build from the foundation and up to the walls, to the wiring, to the plumbing, right, electrical, everything is a detail, until finally the final touches, the fixtures, the paint, all of the last little details, and then of course the mezuzah on the doorpost. Now it's ready to roll. It's a process. It's 100% the process. Kabbalah says, I'm going to share this with you once again. Kabbalah says that creation of the universe by God is also a process. And in general, we can divide it into 4 steps. There's the world of Atzilut, which is the vision. That's the original vision. Then the world of Bria, which is concretizing the vision. Yetzira is forming the vision. And Asiya is making the vision. So we have here vision. Bria means creation, but what would it? So there's vision, and then there's a little bit more of fleshing it out. Then there's the final form, and then there's actually acting on it. Those are your 4 worlds. And by the way, in the creative process, in anything that we do, whether it's building a home, building a house, whether it's starting a business, whether it's creating a piece of art, whether it's writing a book, whatever creative activity it's going to be, it will follow these 4 steps. These 4 steps also happen to parallel the 4 letters of God's name, the Yud, which is the creative, the vision, creative letter, the Hey, a little bit more fleshed out, the Vav, which means moving it forward, and the Hey, the last Hey, which is again expanding. So the 4 worlds correspond very neatly to the 4 letters of God's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, which are the letters of creation and the energy of the process of creation, and they also mirror Chachma and Bina and the 6 emotive energies, and finally Malchut. So that's kind of an overview. I know I'm going through it a little bit quickly, but that's kind of the basic look at the 4 worlds and what they mean. In human terms, these 4 dimensions also exist. We have, within ourselves, we have these 4 dimensions, and they exist as the spiritual, intellectual, emotional, and physical parts of our being. Again, I'll say that again. We each have a spiritual, reality. We have an intellectual reality. We have an emotional reality, and we have a physical reality. one easy way to understand this, and I've mentioned this many times before, is when it comes to compatibility with another person. When it comes to relationship compatibility. So people can be compatible, starting from the bottom now, on a physical level. People can be compatible on an emotional level. People can be compatible on an intellectual level. And people can be compatible also on a spiritual level. And sometimes it could be some and not the other. Sometimes it could be all of the above, and that's the ideal when you have that compatibility running all the way through. When it comes to, getting back to my previous example, when it comes to building something or creating something, it's kind of cool when the vision went straight down through all of these different dimensions. In other words, when you can see the final product at the bottom here and say, I can see within the final product what the original vision was. I can see in Asiya what the original Atzilut vision was. That's kind of cool, because oftentimes, the reason why I say that is because oftentimes we start off with a vision, with an idea, or with a vision, and by the time it's done, it often does not look like that original vision. Why? Who knows? Life and practical things. People intend to do things all the time and don't end up achieving the vision because stuff gets in the way. But it's important to understand this process of how things unfold, and it's a truth in life. It's a truth in life because it's a truth in the spiritual reality of things. This is the process by which God created, and therefore this process is imprinted in the very fabric of being. And so when we create, or when we conceptualize, or when we build something, it follows the same process. Vision, initial creation, forming it, and then concretizing it, acting on it. That's the way it is. Let me stop for a second and let's take questions. Questions, unmute yourself if you have any questions, or drop it in the chat.
Is there a name to this four process system?
In Kabbalah, it's the names of the world, or the name of the worlds. Atzilut, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya. Are you saying is there an English name for it? Wait, hold on, you're muted.
To encompass the 4-step process.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I'm putting in the chat right now. It's called Seder Hishtalshalut. Very, very good question, and very important to know this, actually. I should have put it on this sheet. Where's my chat box? Okay, here we go. Seder Hishtalshalut. Seder Hishtalshalut. Okay, I just sent it to everybody. Seder means order, and Hishtalshalut means the evolution or chain of being. So in other words, the way things evolve from vision to final product, right? That process on a cosmic level is called Seder Hishtalshalut. The word Hishtalshalut is related to the word Shalshelet in Hebrew. Shalshelet means a chain. So imagine a chain of, like a necklace, a jewelry chain, where you have links, right? Links that are interlinked, right, one into the other, right? You're holding at the top, and it's linked down. So you have one link, the next, but each one is kind of hooked in the other one. So they're connected, but they're also one above or one lower than the other. So in a very similar way, each of these four worlds are linked, but there's a progression. We're going from, an abstract almost, or a conceptual vision, to a very bottom line, a very tangible product at the end of it. That's, at least in that example. So you're definitely evolving the process. There's an evolution here, but the steps are all interlinked and interconnected. So that's a little bit about the name of it, of this idea. But what comes before Seder Hishtalshalut? Oh, one more thing. What's important to know, therefore, and I think I mentioned this even recently, is that Judaism, Kabbalah, believes in creation. God created the world, but also in evolution. Not necessarily in not talking about Darwinism specifically, but in the concept of things evolving, absolutely you have that in Kabbalah. Because God doesn't just create the final world of Asiya, the world of action, boom, right? God just created this world and that's it, and there's no hierarchy. It's not how it works. Everything unfolds from the vision down step by step. And by the way, Kabbalah asked the question, why is this so? Couldn't God just create from the get-go just the bottom line? Like, why does it follow this step-by-step progression? Do you understand my question? Let me clarify the question one more time. Why does there need to be 4 worlds? Couldn't God have just created this reality and done with it? God doesn't need, human beings, we need to take a vision and then work with it and evolve it. But God doesn't need to evolve it. God could have just created, no limits to God, right? God could have just created it, on the lowest level to begin with. So why the process? See, here's what Kabbalah says. It's not for God, it's for us. Because if it was just God and then us, there would be no linkage, no steps, no ladder back up. Are you with me? But because of Seder Hishalshulut, you and I can climb spiritually. We can have an understanding of the world above it, and then maybe above it, and then maybe above it, and climb higher and higher in our spiritual progress to kind of climb back up the ladder. So when things are created step by step by step, it benefits the recipient on the other end, because then they can reverse engineer it. But if God would create in an impossible way, when I say impossible, I mean in a logically impossible way, there's no step-by-step order. It's like the impossible. You're going from pure infinite to, yes, a spiritual trail of breadcrumbs back to God. Yes, Adam, exactly. If God were just, infinite God, and then boom, pops out a finite reality, that's it. The gulf would be too vast and too impossible on every level to even conceive of. There would be no connection between us and God. As is, it's a challenge. But at least we have, hold up a necklace, hold it at the top, and it extends, I don't know how many inches, 15 inches, 17 inches, it extends 20 inches down. Yeah? So it's a far drop relative. Yeah, let's just say it's a far drop. Okay? But if you start at 1, you can make your way back up. There's a way to climb back up. This link, that link, that link, that link. There's a way to move back up. But if you just have 2 vastly different spaces, there's no connection. So God really did it for us. To give you an example, when teaching, I'll give you a teaching example. A good way to teach would be to take a concept and make it, bring it down level after level, to make it really understandable, but to do it in a way where the student can climb back up to the original big idea that maybe the teacher can't communicate in its pure form because it's too visionary. So the goal is to create a ladder through which the student can climb back up. Okay. One more very important thing. I'm going to share my screen one more time. You see these 4 levels? These are the 4 rungs of the ladder in Jacob's dream. The Bible tells us, the Torah tells us, how Jacob, when he was fleeing from his home, from the wrath of his twin brother Esau. So when Jacob or Yaakov is fleeing from home, he gets tired along the way, and he lies down to go to sleep, and he has a dream. Happens to be he was sleeping at the space where the Holy Temple would be built later. But what was his dream? Famous dream of Jacob's ladder. He dreams of a ladder, and there are angels going up the ladder, coming down the ladder. Kabbalah says, you know what this ladder was? There were 4 rungs of the ladder, and it was these 4 worlds. He was seeing how, energies are moving up and back down. Again, I'm mentioning this, first of all, because I think it's kind of cool. But there's a lot of artwork. It's interesting how, art picks up on certain biblical stories. There's a lot of artwork about Jacob's ladder. Happens to be there's a lot of art on Jacob's ladder. Depicts the rungs. But in Kabbalah, it's specifically 4, and it's these 4. But the reason why I'm mentioning this is because the notion of, why the four worlds? Why this process? First you have the vision, and then you have this, and then you flesh it out, and then you conquer that, then you actually build it. That's for us, because we can't jump without doing the steps. But God could do anything. God created it logically. In other words, in a way that fits to our logical progression. Like, I could see how one evolves into the other, in order that we should be able to have an understanding of it and also be able to climb back up. Hope that makes sense. Now, the next, all of this is still inside the box, and I really love the way it looks here, because it's like, see the piece of paper almost, the white background? It's kind of like a box, a limitation. This is all still inside the box. This is what we call still within the realm of created, emanated. It's once the process of creation is beginning, we have this chain, Seder Shalshalut. But what's beyond the box? What's above it? This takes us to our next page. And I didn't draw this out, no circles, no lines, no color coded, just text on a page. So forgive me for not being as creative, if you will, as the other pages. But this is what I want to share with you about the map, the Kabbalah map, or the map of the cosmos. So we start at the top, not spatially, but we start at the beginning, or before the beginning. Remember, this is before any of all of the stuff that we just talked about. This is preceding that. So we start with Ein Sof. Ein Sof is the infinite one. Now, the literal meaning of Ein Sof means no end, or without end. This is referring to God, who has no end. That means that God has no limit. God has no limitations. Everything else necessarily has an end. Why? Because if it has a beginning, it has an end. If it wasn't always, then it won't always be either. Are you with me on that? In other words, if it wasn't always in existence, but rather it came to be in existence, then at some point it will cease to be in existence. It will have a beginning, and it will have an end. But God does not have a beginning, nor does God have an end. Ein Sof means no limits. Sof is end. No end, no limits, no limitations, no boundaries, no borders. God just is. God is. God didn't start from anywhere. God didn't start from something else. If something else spawned God, well then let's talk about that thing, right? So who's that, right? Where did God come from? Let's identify that. So when we go back, there's an original existence that just is. Because if it came from somewhere, then where did it come from? Where did that come from? Where did that come from? What's the beginning? God, or Ein Sof, is the beginning. But not the beginning so much as the original, or that which always was. So anyway, so we start off with Ein Sof. This would be also referred to as the essence of God, the quintessence of God, all of these other euphemisms, all speaking about the same reality. This is the truest and purest reality of God, Ein Sof. But together with the Ein Sof, Kabbalah talks about the Ar Ein Sof. So that's what I wrote in the next line, Ar Ein Sof. I know I wrote it like O-R, which could be read as Or, but in Hebrew it's like Ar. Sometimes it's written with an H, just to show that it's not the English word Or, but I'm telling you what it is. Ar means light. So this is not the Ein Sof itself. This is the Ar Ein Sof. It's the light of the infinite one. You see? Okay. So again, Ein Sof is the infinite one. The Ar Ein Sof is the light of the infinite one. Or, alternatively, it could be Ar Ein Sof, the light itself is infinite. I don't want to get too nitty gritty and too technical, But there are two ways of understanding in Kabbalah. There are two ways of understanding the meaning of the phrase Ar Ein Sof. Either it means it's the Ar, the light of the Ein Sof. So Ein Sof is a noun, and Ar, I don't know okay. It's one way of saying Ar is the light of the Ein Sof, but the Ein Sof is this Ein Sof. The other way to look at it is that the Ar is Ein Sof. In other words, the Ein Sof means without limit, without end. This light is also without end. This light is infinite. Why? Because it's coming from the infinite one, so the light is also infinite. So either we're saying the light is the light of the infinite one, or we're saying because it's the light of the infinite one, it's also infinite light. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Two different ways of understanding it? Yes? Okay. As long as I get one nod, I'm moving forward. By the way, if you have any question or any clarification, just unmute and jump right in. So far we have Ein Sof, which is the essence of God, and Joy, go ahead.
It seems like using adjectives that how humans communicate to describe something that is impossible to describe.
Yes.
But we're trying to do the best we can in our world.
Yes. That's why when we talk about Ein Sof, there's a real effort in Kabbalah to use a negative description as opposed to a positive description. Are you with me? Notice that Ein Sof is not a positive description. Oh, I'm sorry. I literally translated it as a positive description. That's so weird. How awkward. Ein Sof means literally without end. In other words, we're not saying what God is, we're saying what God isn't. You see the difference? In other words, Ein Sof is not saying who God is and what God is. Okay, so the translation here gives off a false impression. So the typical translation of Ein Sof, the way it's done colloquially, is infinite, the infinite one. But in reality, Ein Sof means God does not have an end. We're not telling you who God is or what God is, we're telling you what God is not. And that indicates exactly what Joy said, that we struggle, or it's really not even fair or accurate to ascribe any positive or any description to God, because that would be ascribing a limitation to God. To define is to limit. So therefore, we're not describing what God is, we're just saying what God doesn't have. God does not have an end, God does not have any limits. Who and what God is? Beyond our understanding. But anyway, either way, this is, Ein Sof is the essence of God. Whatever God that is, the Ar Ein Sof would be the light of that. Now, what is the light? The light means the manifestation of, or the presence of. So one way to look at it is like this. Imagine the sun. The sun has all of these gases, and the sun is luminescent, and the sun also provides light to our world, right? I'm looking outside my window and I see light. I see the light. And that light's coming from the sun. So one way of understanding this is that the light, sometimes light is intended for a recipient, and sometimes light is part and parcel of the fact that a thing is bright, a thing has a certain energy to it, so naturally it gives off light, whether or not it's going to be received by someone else. So to give you an example, does the sun care if it's a cloudy day? The sun doesn't care. Does the sun get frustrated if it's a cloudy day? No. Is the sun happier when it's not a cloudy day? No. Does the sun itself get hotter if there are clouds blocking its rays? No. In other words, the sun is just the sun, and it just shines, and it just does its thing almost for itself. Right? It's not doing it. It within its own self is not doing it for the recipient. It's just a bright being that is luminescent. That's just the reality of what it is. In a similar vein, again, we have to be very careful when talking about God, because we don't want to run into that challenge of defining God or humanizing God. But the way Kabbalah explains it, there's Ein Sof, right? The with no end reality, truth of God. And then together with that, there's the Ar Ein Sof, which is the presence or the revelation of that, not to anyone else, but just the self shine or self expression, if you will, of the Ein Sof. Now, I put here in the next line, AKA, also known as. The Ar Ein Sof is also known as Malchut of Ein Sof. It's the expression of the Ein Sof. So to give you a better understanding of why it's called Malchut of Ein Sof, we need to go back to one of the previous pages. I'll probably go back to this one right here. Okay, this was like a general world with the 10 Sfirot. If you look at the bottom, I didn't spend a lot of time on Malchut. Whoops, too big. I didn't spend a lot of time on Malchut today, but Malchut is always, of the 10 energies, it's always at the bottom. And the Malchut of one dimension will lead to the top of the next dimension, of the next world beneath it. So again, getting back to the links in the chain example, which two parts of the link are touching? The bottom of one touches the top of the other. So let's turn the page to this. So you see the Malchut of Atzilut, that top world, the lowest dimension Malchut, the lowest sphere energy, Malchut, will actually form the top of the next world down, the world of Beriah. It will become the Keter, the crown, so to speak, of the world beneath it. Just like a chain that's being held, from the top, and the link, the bottom link of one, the bottom part of one link is going to be touching the top of the next, so to Malchut touches the top. I actually was thinking, when I originally was designing, originally putting this together last night, so I was going to put the worlds touching each other, so that you could see kind of like the interlinked nature of one world and the next, because they are linked to each other. But I wanted to make sure to put the labels of the names of the worlds in between, so that you can identify them and know the names. Atzila, Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. Nonetheless, Malchut then, if we zoom in on Malchut here, I love how even in this smaller version it's got a little bit of an M, representing. The Malchut is always the way that a dimension is represented to the thing beneath it. So it's all about expression. The Malchut of any level is its expression or revelation. The other energies are how it is to itself almost. The Malchut is how it faces outward. Whether or not there's someone there. Let's see, Robert. Oh, excellent. I'm seeing. So Stephanie asked a question. Does God actually have emotions? We're talking about intellect and emotions. These are emanations of God. So these are energies that God employs in order to create the fabric of this world that we enjoy. It doesn't mean that God actually possesses these energies. God is utilizing these as tools to create the world and emanate out and create the fabric of the universe. So I think it's less about does God actually have emotions to does God emanate these energies to create a world. The answer would be yes on that latter question. We're not suggesting that God thinks or feels the way that we do. It's that God has created. Look, we're created in the image of God, and that means in the image of the 10 Sfirot. The reason why it exists within us is because it exists within the fabric of the universe. And who put it there? God put it there. So we can't say that God is limited by these or defined by these emanations or by these energies that He manifests. But these are still manifestations that God of energies that God puts out into the world for us and for the whole structure to exist. Hope that makes sense. Yeah, Stephanie.
Thank you. It does. I just want to make sure that I'm clear. This is like a lifelong question I've had. So what you're saying is when it says in the Torah that God says, I am a jealous God, God is using the emotion of jealousy to teach. God does not feel jealousy.
Maimonides, this is not even Kabbalah. Maimonides says, Rambam, in his work of philosophies and Jewish law, he says that any time you find an emotive description of God in the Torah, it should never be construed, God forbid, as God is actually feeling the emotion. What's happening is that God is acting, so to speak, in a way that one would, if one were to feel that emotion, then that action would follow. But it's not that God feels the emotion, it's that certain things are happening, and the way we understand it is, that would be associated with that, with such and such emotion, but it's not about the emotion. So for example, if there's a consequence, right, if there's a consequence in the universe, so we would say, the consequence is because someone got angry and that's why, or someone loved and that's why. So we say that God does the actions, but without being stuck in the emotions. This is also true about other anthropomorphic terminology used in Scripture. For example, that God took us out of Egypt with his outstretched arm. No. One second. One second. No, it does not mean. It absolutely does not mean that God reached down from the heavens with a physically outstretched arm and rescued us from Egypt. No. What it means is that God created the miracles through which we got out of Egypt. But by doing so, it's like if someone extends a hand to pull someone out of a negative place, someone, God forbid, is drowning or in quicksand or in harm's way, and you reach out and you grab them and you pull them and you schlep them out of that bad place. That's conceptually what God did to us, so that's why he uses that terminology. The main idea to remember, specifically to your question, Stephanie, which I'm sure is a question that many of us have thought about, if not today, then at other times, is the Torah medaberes b'lashon b'nei adam, which is a famous statement of our sages. The Torah speaks using the language of human beings. The Torah uses our language. Because if the Torah used God's language, there would be no way to decipher it. There would be no way to make any sense of it. It would be speaking a foreign language. Torah therefore uses our language so that we have some idea of what's going on, and then we have to be sure not to limit it to the way we perceived it, but to understand that there's something deeper. But getting back to Malchut. Malchut is always the expression energy of any given reality. So, for example, Atzilut's expression is carried in the Malchut, that bottom point. Bria's expression is carried in the Malchut, Yetzirah's as well. That's why on this page over here, I'm going to make the screen bigger once again, is the Ein Sof is also referred to as Malchut of Ein Sof, because Malchut is always the expression of. So Malchut of Ein Sof is the expression or the light of the Ein Sof. It's also called Shemei Rabbah, God's great name, or the infinite's, or the no end's, great name. Why? Because name is also a form of expression or light. It's how something is expressed. Now, usually we understand expression to others, but even, like I said, with the sun is expressing itself. It's not about necessarily the recipient. It just shines. It just radiates. Whoever's there is there. Whoever receives it, receives it. If there are clouds and it's dark, Zal Zayin, so let it be. It doesn't care, but it's expressing it. That expression is Malchut with God, is the energy of Malchut, the idea of a great name. So these are all the euphemisms or other terminologies that are used to describe the Ein Sof, and they've all come up in the chapter that we started last week, chapter 27, I believe, of our text. 27 or 28. Now after this, so now we have Ein Sof, the infinite, and we have the Ein Sof. And that's the way it was. For how long? It's beyond time. Right? God is Ein Sof, there's no limits. Time is not existent. Time is not a limitation. That's how it was. Then, and I know I'm using a loaded term, then when? I don't know. But at some point, in a time before time, in a place before place, at some point, God decides to create the other. And that is the Tzimtzum. I don't know why I chose to go dashed lines and whatever, but that's what I did. Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is the great step forward in order to have the emergence of otherness. The tzimtzum, as we spoke about at length last week and other times, the tzimtzum is the contraction of the infinite light, or the contraction of God's infinity, or no endness, into itself. There's a contraction which gives necessarily space for the other now to emerge. Before the tzimtzum, there's no other space, because there's God, and God is without end, and the light is without end, and there's no space. The tzimtzum creates space. Space for otherness to emerge. After the tzimtzum, there's space, but there's also what's called a roshem, which is a residue, which is still a residue or a point of light, like a yud. There's still a little bit of the light, the original light left behind. There's still a trace. There's still a trace. Right? You can clean up the area and wipe away the mess, but if you hold a microscope, you can still see, the DNA still there. There's still some measure of residue from what was. And in truth, I need to clarify. This is really important what I'm about to say. It's not on this chart, and I don't think I mentioned it before, or at least last week I didn't mention it. Kabbalah, there are different ways of understanding this, but the way we understand, the normative way of understanding this, of the tzimtzum, is that the tzimtzum only affected the perception of the reality, but not the reality itself. Very important. The tzimtzum only affected the perception, but not the reality. God is not actually absent, but to us who emerge in that so-called absence, we no longer see God. It's kind of like if we saw the truth of the divine matrix, we could not exist the way we exist. Our minds would be so blown, our eyes would be so open to the truth. We couldn't exist in a human way and survive. It would be too much information, too much insight. The story is told, I've told it many times, I've told it a few times before. The Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, shortly before he passed away, he asked his son, "What do you see?" And his son says, "I see the table or the stender, the lectern, and I see, whatever it was physically." And the Alter Rebbe said to his son, "I see the Word of God that's giving it life. Like the Matrix." Again, I don't want to dumb it, I don't want to make it too materialistic, but I'm using the phrase Matrix, the soak. The Alter Rebbe said, "I see the Devar Hashem, I see the Word of God, the letters of creation that are enlivening it. I don't see the thing itself. I see the source." That's a perspective that's not a life perspective. That's why it was at the end of his life, shortly before he passed away, very shortly before he passed away, he was getting a glimpse almost from the other side. This is the way life is seen from the other perspective. Through the other perspective, it's all God. And this physical stuff, that's the distortion, or that's our perception. So the tzimtzum creates the possibility for there to be another perspective. But God, in His own perspective, let me put it simply. The tzimtzum doesn't actually affect God. The tzimtzum affects that now there can be an other that could feel themselves and not perceive God. But God doesn't actually go away. To give you a very, very imperfect example, it's like, the police stations have these interrogation rooms with a two-way mirror. You know what that is? Yeah, you know what, right? You know the two-way mirror? Or the one-way mirror, whatever it is, where you look, if you're on the inside and you look, you see yourself, you see the reflection. But on the other side, they can see right through. God put us in through the tzimtzum. We exist and we look around and all we see is ourselves. stuff. We can't see past. But God on the other side sees all the way right through. When God puts up that mirror, that creates space for us to operate in and not see behind the curtain. Because if we saw behind the curtain, we wouldn't exist. We would cease to exist. If we saw the code, we wouldn't exist. That's what Kabbalah teaches. If you and I saw the code, then we would cease to exist as self-contained, self-identifying creatures. We would melt. We would melt into the source. For us not to melt into the source, for us to wake up and take ourselves seriously and feed ourselves and eat and drink and all of that stuff requires us to not see behind the curtain, to not see. So God puts up the mirrors. For us, it creates a new reality. But God sees all the way through. God's on the other side. God doesn't. To God, the mirrors are not in the way. You with? Does that make sense? The tzimtzum only works for us, but not for Him. God is always here. So when we talk about the residue, the roshim, that means even for us there's a residue. But for God, God's full essence is always present. For us, now suddenly we're on the scene and we don't see it and we don't know what we're talking. What is this? Where's God? Who is God? What is God? We don't know. There's a residue though. Thank God for the residue, because that's at least some inkling of God. But the full picture is not seen. The full picture is shrouded. That shrouding is the tzimtzum. Okay, let me get back to the screen because we're going to finish the map and then do some final thoughts. So we have the infinite, we have the light of the infinite, we have the tzimtzum contraction. After the contraction, we have still the residue of divine energy. It's still on that level as a, it's still considered to be the point. Why a point? It's kind of like Chachma, we said the point. It's still vague and nebulous and not defined, and it's the infinite potential. On some level, broad potential. And then it's concretized with a kav. The kav is a line of light that emerges from that residue. And that now begins the process of building out creation. And that begins with Adam Kadmon, also known as Ak, which Adam Kadmon literally means primordial man, but it's not man, but it means this original construct. It's also called, and the reason why I put these other terms is because in our text it references it. It's also called Tahiri La, which means this, it's hard to translate, Tahiri La, this higher purity, this higher subtle pure reality. It's like the first emergence of somethingness, of otherness after the Kav. You see, until then it's only been God. It's been God, it's been God's light, it's been a tzimtzum and a residue of God and a line of light of God. And now suddenly with Ak, now you have the first emergence of other. Now you have the first other. But even this state of other is so subtle, it's not an other like we know the other. And then after that, now you get to the four worlds, Atzilot, Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya, and those are the worlds that I depicted on, at least in this crude depiction, on the previous page. So that rolls into what we know as the four worlds: emanation, creation, formation, and action. This is a very, very, very broad and imperfect, well, not imperfect, it's very broad outline of the map of reality as seen through the lens of Kabbalah. So we start off with just God and just God's light. And then that light for us and for everything that follows the tzimtzum, all of that is shrouded in darkness. So we go from light to darkness and then back to light. That's the process. We go from light to darkness and then again from darkness to light. And that's the reemergence of the creative energy that then creates the world. But even as it creates, there's still a darkness of the truth, because even as it's created, we still don't see immediately the true source. Although the higher you go, the more you see the source, but nonetheless, there's still some hiding of the source. Certainly when you get down to the world of Asiya, the world of action, the source is pretty much entirely concealed, and it takes a lot of effort to peel through the layers and get back to a space where we can perceive God. Okay, so what is the big idea here? It's kind of first of all, it's good to know. It's good to know the structure. Number one, it's good to know where we are. Yeah, when you go to a mall, a shopping mall, everyone loves the maps on the mall, right? Everyone loves when you walk into the mall. They have those big structures, and they have all the stores, and then they have a red circle, and it says you are here. It's good to know where you are. Number one, it's good to know where we are. You are here, good. Now I know at least. I know where Nordstrom is. I know where Saks is. I know where this is. I know where Macy's is. Now I know. Good. Baruch Hashem. So it's good to know. But also, the last point that I mentioned, that's really why it's brought down in our text. The idea of light and darkness, and we mentioned this last week. Light and darkness, and the interplay between the two. How light leads to darkness, and how darkness leads to light. That's how the handoff happens. You have light that's too big, so you need to condense it. And when you condense it, the light almost, not fully, but almost disappears altogether. And then after it disappears, then it can reemerge. In artistic vision, we have the vision, but then in between that and actually implementing it, somehow the vision has to be pushed away so that I can formulate some tools to make it a reality. And all of the infinite possibilities have to be pushed away to get one finite possibility. Too big of an idea, and that itself becomes a barrier to produce a single idea. So we have the big vision. That has to be moved away. Not totally. Keep the residue. Keep a trace of it, because you're going to need it soon. But once all of the infinite is out, then we can begin with a finite path. So there's the light, then there's the darkness. But that darkness leads to a path forward, which once again is the light. Because you couldn't move forward without first the darkness. Turns out that all the steps are necessary. You need the light has to turn to darkness, the darkness has to turn to light again. They all work together. Which once again reminds us how opposites are necessary. How even the opposites of revelation and concealment, light and darkness, infinite and finite, they have to work together for anything to get done. You have to have a vision. You have to then condense it or wipe it away, almost. And then you have to reimagine something specific, something particular, something practical to move it forward. And at the end of the day, as I showed you with those four worlds stacked on top of each other, the goal is that the Asiya action, not only the action, even more so, the way it's received by the other, not just what you do, but the way it's received by the other should align with the original vision that you had. You want the person that's receiving it, whether it's a product that they're buying, whether it's a book that they're reading, whether it's a piece of art that they're enjoying, whether it's a piece of music that they're listening to, whether it's a film that they're watching, whatever it is, whatever they're getting, not what you gave, but whatever they're getting, the goal is that should absolutely touch the original vision, that almost infinite vision that you had. And when we do that, there's nothing as satisfying in the world as having that line go all the way through and seeing the materializing, seeing the emergence, the rising of what began with such blinding light. In order for that to happen, there's a process. And the process is light, darkness, light, darkness, light, darkness. In fact, between each of those four worlds, there's another tzimtzum. I didn't mention it today, but I'm mentioning it right now. I don't have time to get into it right now fully. But between each of the worlds, there's another tzimtzum, contraction, and then an expansion. First a contraction, and then an expansion for that next level. There's always check down and check. Like there's always that process of condensing and opening, contracting and opening up. That's the way it works. And why does it work like this? Next week we're going to get into this. Next week we're going to understand how. From the larger perspective, the light and the darkness are not opposites because they're on the same team. They're playing for the same team. On the ultimate level, the light and darkness are all intertwined because essentially, like God's heartbeat, expanding and contracting, but it's not an opposite because they're all coming from the same source that's greater than each of them. So if you isolate a moment of expansion, of infinite expansion, and then you isolate a moment of contraction and perceived darkness, you would say they're opposites. Look, one is light and one is darkness. They're two different things. And on that level, they could be opposites and there could be friction between the two. But when you look at the bigger picture and you look at the source, you say, these are not opposites. These are complementary. They have to work together. It's the greatest gift that you have both of these that can work together. Which reminds us, as I always like to make this connection, whether at the beginning of the class, the middle of the class, or at the end of the class, but certainly at some point, which reminds us how we're meant to be with each other. If we isolate it, if we just take, one moment, we could say that I'm different than you and you're different than me and we have nothing in common. It helps to take the bigger picture, to look at the bigger picture and say, from a bigger perspective, not only are we more alike than we think, but we actually need each other. My expansion needs your contraction. Your expansion needs my contraction, right? We each need each other. And it's only by working together that the original plan, the original kavanah, the original intention of God creating the world is realized. It takes a certain level of maturity to have a bigger view than just the tunnel vision. I'm just looking at this and we're different, we have nothing in common, I can't speak to you, I can't be your friend. Because you believe that and I believe this, we're done. Unfortunately, that's what happens, right? Can't speak to people. Why? Because of a particular thing. Have to take a deeper view, a bigger view, and understand how there's an arc, and how sometimes even the contradictory things are complementary and not so different. Okay, so let us all, as we prepare to ring in the new year, Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah sets the tone for the rest of the year. It's like the head that controls the body. And so here is my advice for a resolution. My suggestion. Resolve this year. Resolve this year on Rosh Hashanah to have a more loving and inclusive, to be more loving and inclusive. And that will impact every single day of the year. It's interesting because Kabbalah speaks of Rosh Hashanah like an accordion. Imagine you take a piece of paper and you fold it again, right? And then you put something through in one spot. When you unfold it, you'll see the hole through a bunch of different parts. Rosh Hashanah, 48 hours of Rosh Hashanah. It starts in 2 weeks. Shabbat and Sunday. What we do and what we think about and what we speak about and what we study and pray and read, everything that we do touches every other day of the year. So it's so powerful. If we're in a space of connectedness with each other, I have no doubt that that's going to translate into a year because it's going to touch. It's going to literally, as the year unfolds from that space, it will be already impacted by that love that we've, and that connection that we've created. So, if nothing else, I hope you take me up on my suggestion because that is certainly what the world needs. To remind us also of Rosh Hashanah, let's sound the shofar. So, stay tuned. We're going to do 10 sounds of the shofar. These are the 10 basic sounds. 3 sets. The first set has 4, and then 4 sounds, and then 3 and 3, and that's a total of 10. All right. Y'all ready? May the shofar ring in for all of us. My pleasure, good resolutions and blessings. May we move from a place of constriction, maybe, to a place of open blessings for us and for all of us, together as one. Thank you for joining me today. Don't forget, this Thursday night, we have a very special program, our gala dinner. For those in and around Atlanta, at least, I can offer this. We will bring you the dinner, the gourmet catered dinner, and then the program is online. If you are out of town but want to join the program, let me know. We can make it happen. But it's going to be a beautiful event. We're going to have a live concert from Johannesburg. Our guest speaker, keynote speaker, is from London. We have a video presentation. I'll be emceeing the evening. It's going to be a really fun evening, really inspiring, pre-high holiday celebration of Jewish life and learning. So join us this Thursday, September 10th. The website is intownjewishacademy.org/gala, Gala. So please consider joining us. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it helps support the work that we do with education here and, of course, worldwide. All right. Good to see you all. Have a wonderful week. Shavua Tov.
Thank you very much. Koya, beautiful the show. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Shavua Tov.
My pleasure. Shavua Tov. Bye. Regards to everybody. Stay in good health and lots of love to everybody. We'll see you all soon. Take care, everybody.